Hi there, it's Jeff from RV Parenting, and I'm doing this one solo today. And this video is all about surge protectors. That's what this thing is. This is my surge protector. And in this video, we're getting into what they do, what they don't do, how they differ from what they call an EMS, an energy management system, and what the likelihood is that you might need one to protect the electrical components in your RV. So let's get into all of that now. Okay, so I mentioned that this thing protects you. So how I use it is you go to the pedestal at the campground where you're going to be parked at, and I plug this thing into the pedestal by itself. Usually the breakers are off, but I like to flip them off if they're on. And I'll plug this thing in. Nothing else is connected at this point. And then I flip the breakers on, and I like to see if there are 3 green dots across the top here. That means that everything is working properly with that pedestal in that campground. Then I flip the breakers off. I leave this thing plugged in. And what I do is I simply plug in the cord from my RV into this thing. And it's got this handy little kind of weather shield that kind of keeps it protected from the elements. It's a little challenging, especially doing this on camera. But I just plug that in and I close the hatch. Then I flip the breakers back on, and that's it. So I mentioned briefly about the difference between this and what they call an EMS, an energy management system. So this thing mostly protects you against spikes, big power spikes. The most likelihood of that happening is going to come from lightning storms. If lightning strikes somewhere in your campground, especially if it strikes the pedestal that you're connected to, that's going to send a big surge of power. This thing is going to stop that surge from entering the electrical system in your RV. That's going to save many of your appliances and other things that are connected inside your RV from getting damaged or destroyed. But it also does check for things like open neutrals and open grounds and an open circuit altogether. Open neutrals and open grounds can cause big spikes in power too, up to 200 volts. So you don't want that hitting any of the things that are plugged into your RV that are inside there. Now, an EMS is going to take this a little bit further. It's going to protect against high voltage and low voltage. Low voltage can damage compressors. Most of us have those small AC units on the roof of our RVs. It can protect against damaging that compressor in your air conditioner, but it can also protect against computers or appliances that are connected inside your RV as well. Now, I will say that high voltage is not that common. Spikes can be, but just generally high voltage is not that common. Low voltage is more common, but it's more common in 30 amp pedestals than it is 50 amp pedestals. This is a 50 amp connector here, and the average RV park, at least the nicer ones, are going to have 50 and 30 amp options on the pedestal. So of course I always use the 50 amp if it's available, and it always has been. If it's not available, I've got some handy adapters here. This one goes from 50 amps to 30 amps. So in the event they don't have a 50 amp option, I just plug that adapter in, and then I plug that in, I'm good to go. Of course, that does reduce the number of things I can use at the same time inside the RV. And then if I'm really desperate and I'm really somewhere in the middle of nowhere, I have this adapter that goes from 30 amp to 110, just a standard household plug. And of course, at that point, you're really probably just running lights, maybe keeping the fridge on, not much else. That's not going to be able to power your whole RV, but it's better than nothing. And these adapters are cheap, which is why I have them, why I recommend you have them on hand too, because you don't want to get to a campground, find they don't have 50 amps, and then you're kind of forced to either run the generator or just not have power. These things are inexpensive. I'll link to them on Amazon down in the description below, along with this surge protector that I use as well. I mentioned that this thing also checks for reverse polarity, and that's another thing you might encounter as well. Reverse polarity can actually damage televisions and computers more than anything else, and my surge protector does show me if there's reverse polarity going on, so that's good to know. Now, of course, the big question is, what's the likelihood of encountering bad electricity at the pedestals at the campgrounds you're going to? Well, the reality of it is you're not likely to ever encounter any serious problems. That's even more true if you're staying at super nice RV parks or RV resorts where they have maintenance crews on hand that are constantly checking and fixing things and keeping the equipment in the park in good working condition. If you're staying at like $15 a night RV parks that look like they haven't been touched in 20 years, then you're going to need this even more. But I want you to think of this not as something that you're going to need and use frequently. I want you to think of it like you would an insurance policy. Most of us have car insurance and life insurance, and we have these things, if we're using them correctly, we're having these things simply to protect us against the possibility of something going wrong, but we really hope that nothing ever goes wrong. We hope that we never have to use any of our insurance policies. This thing is going to be the exact same way. Hopefully you'll never need it. From reading forums and Facebook groups and things like that, it sounds like the full-time RVers encounter minor issues with some regularity, but big issues they encounter about once every couple of years. So it's not going to be something that you're going to see on any regular basis. I did mention, though, that the nicer the RV park, generally the better the equipment. However, I did recently read an article from a guy who mentioned that he stayed at Disney World's Fort Wilderness RV Park. That's Disney World's official RV park located in Disney World. And we stayed there as well recently and had a great time. But this guy took a picture of the 50 amp connector on the pedestal at his campground, and it was in horrible shape. Parts of the plastic were broken off. There was some actual wiring exposed that if the breaker were on and somebody were to touch that, they could probably be killed. But we didn't encounter that on our recent visit. We were there just about 3 weeks ago at the time of this recording, maybe a month ago. We recently recorded, while we were there, we recorded a review video of the whole place. We loved staying there, and it's the only official RV park in Disney World, and they don't even have one at Disneyland. So if you're interested in going to Disney World in your RV, definitely check out that video. I'll put a link in the description down below, and I'll put a card for it at the end. But again, this is going to be an insurance policy. You're probably never going to need it, but if you ever do need it, you're going to be so glad you got one. Replacing an air conditioner is going to be expensive. Replacing a television is going to be expensive. Replacing a refrigerator is going to be expensive. This thing is about $100. If you do opt for the EMS system, that's going to be in the few $100 range. I think that this is sufficient for me, but you're going to want to check them out, maybe do a little more research and decide for yourself what's going to be best for you and your RV. Again, I'm going to put a link to mine and these handy adapters down below in the description. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. It sends a great signal to YouTube that this is good quality content that other RV owners just like you need to see. And then smash that subscribe button and the bell notification button too. But with that, we'll see you in the next video.